Hello and welcome. I'm here today with this new laptop. This is the ASUS ProArt P16. This is brand new for 2024 and this is coming on board here with AMD's new Zen 5, particularly Zen 5 and the AI CPUs that are now all the rage, or at least the CPU manufacturers are trying to make them all the rage. Let's begin here. We'll start with looking at this laptop. This is a metal device. It's beautifully polished black aluminum here. And on the bottom here, we've got plastic. So this is the grating and grills. We've got at the rear here of this device, we've got 3 LED lights that talk about power, SSD access, and I believe one is for the battery. Yes, that is correct. The bottom is, we've got these rubberized feet here to give it a little bit of elevation from the desk. But keep in mind, for the type of GPU and CPU that's in here, I think this is insufficient. So I'm not sure what ASUS was thinking here, but these are not going to be enough for sufficient airflow to the 47 inside. Now, mind you, for the specs that are in here, it's gonna really be okay. And ASUS has done a lot here with the BIOS to make sure that they've restricted this device so it doesn't actually exceed the thermal capacity of this. That's going to be a big topic for later discussion, so hold on to your hats for that. The other nice thing about the ProArt P16, also the Zephyrus G16, if some of you might recognize the format being very, very similar, is if you look at this here, we've got 6 speakers on board. So we've got 2 woofers, and we also have got 2 top facing speakers on the keyboard deck of this device. So that's something new for the Zephyrus 6 series as well as the ProArt series. These are identically the same chassis. Even the port selection is quite the same. So yeah, this is USB Type-C. We've got a USB Type-A port. Both of these, there's one on the other side here, are actually the 3.2 Gen 2 variety. That means you get a full 10 gigabits per second on this. Some excellent transfer speeds if you're copying off your USB SSDs or other storage mechanisms as well. Absolutely fantastic. And the SD card here, this is an SD Express 7.0 reader. That means theoretically, if you have the right type of SD card, you're going to get upwards of 300 megabytes per second read speeds at least. Write speeds will be a little bit lower than that. All right, so very, very well equipped laptop in my opinion for creators. It's got everything that you need on board here. So here we've got a type headphone and microphone audio combo jack. Another of those USB 10 gigabits per second, 3.2 Gen 2 ports. This one is USB 4, which means equivalent to Thunderbolt 4. I believe it gives you 40 gigabits per second full bandwidth. This is an HDMI 2.1 port with FRL, which is the full rate limit for the actual delivery. I believe that's 48 gigabits per second. And we've got a DC in here. So ASUS has adopted this new square pin, and I kind of like it quite a bit versus the old barrel pin connectors. The top surface of this device is a beautiful brushed matte black aluminum that's available for the ProArt P16. You get like a lighter gray shade on the Zephyrus G16. Very, very similar laptops. I love this absolute branding on the front of this device, and it's actually embossed. So if you touch your hand over this, you can feel that there is a texture to that. Now, this thing does pick up fingerprints, but because it's a dark surface, they don't really show quite as well unless you look closely. So first things first, we've got a beautiful 4K plus 3840 by 2400 16 by 10 aspect ratio OLED display. If you're a gamer, do note this is only a 60 hertz display. You're not going to get high refresh rate here like 120 or even 240 hertz like you would on the Zephyrus G16 counterpart. So it's a bit of a trade-off there. If you're more into gaming, that's your primary purpose, you should look at the Zephyrus G16. If you want a touchscreen, which this is, and it also has Wacom input built in, so it has a digitizer, which means you can use a pen, you can use an ASUS pen or purchase any other 3D stylus, and that will work with this device. So this beautiful display has to be seen, you know, to be believed. I believe this one not only covers 100% of the sRGB space, but also 100% of the DCI-P3 space. So first things first here to note, we've got here this trackpad, or as ASUS calls it, the dial pad, which is useful for apps such as Photoshop, maybe even Premiere, and there's other shortcuts that you can download or perhaps build. However, I reviewed this on last year's ProArt as well, and I wasn't quite pleased because, again, this is one of those things where they're relying on the software developers to actually build software for this device that allows it to be more usable and more effective, essentially. There's a few apps that are home rolled by ASUS, but if you're looking for a lot of versatility here, I don't think the apps are there. The ecosystem just isn't there. We also have another icon here. This, if you swipe down like this, it locks the trackpad, excuse me. So if you're typing or if you're doing a hot, heavy gaming session, I believe the idea there is to lock out your trackpad so you're not getting accidental touches. Generally, that's implemented here as a secondary function on the function row. However, because that space isn't available there, they've implemented this, or that's how it seems to me. Got an HDI sticker here, NVIDIA Studio, and the Ryzen 9 AI HX 370, which is a 12-core CPU that's been released thus far by AMD. And of course, it's got an NPU, so all the touting about the AI this and AI that. So we'll take a look at that a little bit later in the video as well. Now, these keys are nicely tactile. We'll show you a typing test a little bit later in the video here, but they've got a nice press to it. They're not mechanical, but they feel nice. They have a good tactility. There's a little bit of mushiness as you bottom out, but it's, you know, I think it's acceptable for what it is until we start to get those Cherry MX Ultra low profile keys everywhere and broadly adopted. This, I think, is a very, very good keyboard. And as I mentioned, we've got top facing speakers here that flank the keyboard on either side on the keyboard deck, one here and one there. And actually the audio output from this is very, very impressive. It might not be quite as loud as the MacBook Pro 16, but it certainly has the clarity, and it's by far the best set of speakers I've heard, or one of the best that I've heard on any PC laptop. So if you're gaming or just enjoying content, particularly on that 4K plus screen with your Netflix sessions or your Disney with Dolby Vision, I think you're gonna have a fantastic time here. So let's get this device powered on. Press the button here, takes a little bit of a moment, goes through the dance with the RGB. This keyboard is just white backlit only because this is more of a professional device, not really for gamers. So you won't get a full RGB here on the keyboard. It's only gonna be white backlit. So as we boot up, we get the beautiful ProArt logo, the screen kicks in. All right, and here we are at the desktop. It's very, very hard to convey the actual beauty of this screen here and the colors and the sharpness of everything because you've got that 4K plus resolution, which means it's an insanely high PPI that you have on this device here. But that said, it basically is a touch screen. So you can see here, I can right click and I can use my finger for stuff, or I can also alternatively use a stylus. As I mentioned earlier, you can pick up the ASUS stylus or any stylus for that matter and you'll be able to do some graphics work on this. There is a little bit of wobble with the display, nothing too extraordinary. I think this happens on most laptops that have a display with a central hinge. The hinge actually, if we can see here, is here, and there's two additional hinges here. So there's, I believe, a 4-part hinge to this, which actually is quite sturdy. It is the reason why it's less flexible or less wobbly, I suppose, than it would be otherwise. But this is solid. I can hold it open at any angle and it stays there pretty much all the way down to closing, and I don't think there's any issue there. So first things first, we're gonna take a look at the display resolution. I think this is something all of you should see because it's just phenomenal where we've come in a short few years. So we've got a 3840 by 2400, 16 by 10 aspect ratio display. I'll turn this up a little bit so it's a little bit more visible on the camera. Whoops, I meant to go the other way. There we are. So we can see here it's 3840 by 2400 is the resolution of this display. And of course, that 16 by 10 aspect ratio, it's a touch screen. So you can definitely do the finger stuff if you like. Of course, you can use a pen with this as well, but it has a digitizer built into that display coating. It is also a very glossy display. So as you can, of course, see from the video, lots and lots of reflections here. So if you're someone who's actually very prone to those things or hate those reflections, this might not be the laptop for you. Aside from that, it is only 60 Hertz because it is a 4K OLED panel. I thought we were kind of beyond that already, and we were seeing laptops with 240, 120 Hertz OLED displays on them. So I'm not sure what's happening here. Perhaps they quite haven't reached that ballpark with 4K OLED displays quite yet. It is a lot of pixels to push, and 120 Hertz, I don't think there's going to be any GPU in a laptop that can currently drive 4K 120 Hertz displays natively. So that said, though, we're looking here at the refresh rate. It's actually quite good, and it actually works very well. It's very, very smooth, but because of the 60 Hertz, there is a little bit of noticeable screen tearing. I'll demonstrate that in a couple of games later as well. If you're sensitive to that, you may want to turn on VSync in whatever games that it's available if you're playing that. And of course, you can always turn down the game resolution to either 1440p or even 1080p. And at this sharpness, you shouldn't have a big hit to the overall sharpness of your game text and graphics and so on. So next thing we'll do is show the brightness levels here. This right now is at full bright. So ASUS rates this for nominal 400 nits of brightness. So ASUS calls these displays the ASUS Lumina OLED displays. This is their latest and greatest. And I've got to say, these are absolutely fantastic to look at. Visually, they're absolutely stunning. They're the best displays I've seen on any laptop, bar none, even comparing the MacBook Pro 16. So as we state here, it's 100% DCI-P3 coverage. We've got that blue light reduction here, 120 hertz, but of course this being a 4K plus display, this one is only 60 hertz. There are other displays such as on the Zephyrus G16, which are 1440p but up to 240 hertz, but you do get that low response rate of 0.2 milliseconds, which is typical of OLED devices, and very high contrast. So basically black is true black. And of course, they've got mentioned here that it's available on a few different laptops now, the VivoBook series, ZenBook, and StudioBook. ASUS has been leading the charge with bringing these displays pretty much across their products for portfolio. So I'd love to see that. I'd like to see more manufacturers start to do this, but it's still, it's a very premium display technology. So I'm not sure when that'll start to become more normalized. But that said, the Lumina OLED display here, in addition to 100% DCI-P3, these are Pantone validated and color calibrated from the factory. We've got those true black certifications of ASA 500 and 600 true black, and up to 600 nits in HDR brightness. We've got the TUV certified for the black or blue light reduction and up to 1 billion colors. So absolutely beautiful displays. And within the software that ASUS has loaded onto these devices, they've got OLED Care, so it turns the device off. It makes sure that there's refresh or pixel shifting happening behind the scenes, so that when you're displaying text such as this for long periods of time, you're not going to get burn-in. That's been minimized to a large degree these days, but it's very hard to say if you keep the same text in the same position for a long time, you may have some impact to the actual pixels and get a little bit of burn-in. That said, though, I always turn off my my taskbar and set it to automatically hide, so there's no static elements on the screen displayed for a long period of time. All right, let's do a brightness test. So full brightness here, we're going to turn it down in steps, and we'll see how many steps there are. So we'll go down, and we'll keep this up actually to demonstrate the text clarity and the readability as we turn down the brightness. So we're at 50% now brightness. It's still quite visible and quite easy to read, but the reflections are quite overpowering now. So if you're sensitive to those things, it's starting to become a mirror now at 30% here, 20%, and finally at 10%, or I believe this is 0%. I'm not sure if it counts as 0. But at this level here, where the backlight is mostly turned off, we've got very low visibility and readability. It pretty much looks like a mirror. If you however turn it up to 50%, you do get a lot of the visibility and the clarity of the display. So this is an excellent display for coding, working in the dark and low light environments. You can adjust the brightness of this display and keep that clarity of that OLED and the sharpness due to that 4K resolution here in the high pixel density. All right, so here we are with a video playback sample test here. So when you're playing back video, generally 30K or 60, or excuse me, 30 or 60 frames per second, you don't see that stutter here with the YouTube videos or other movie playback. The screen tearing only seems to happen during games because of that high refresh rate and high motion. But absolutely stunning display here. This is at full brightness. I've got my camera turned all the way down to ISO 125, and we've got some studio lighting here that I typically use for filming. I've turned the audio off, so as not to upset YouTube and the copyright. All right, we'll begin the power on sequence here. We'll press the power button on the ProArt P16, and we'll see it come to life. Let's see what the backlight bleed situation looks like. So here we are. We've got power. We get the LEDs, the backlit LEDs flashing on the keyboard. We got this beautiful ProArt logo that welcomes us. No sound on this one, thankfully, because it is meant to be a professional device, unless the zing that you get from the ROG Zephyrus devices. And here we are back at the screen here. So absolutely fantastic. Absolutely zero gradation or gray or anything like that of the sort in terms of the actual backlight bleed situation. But you can see here that it goes to sleep, so it's highly optimized to preserve the longevity of that OLED display. But when you do plug it in, what it does do is switches to a lower profile mode, and it happens automatically thanks to the ProArt software, and you don't have to go into battery saver and toggle all of those things manually when you're unplugged and away from the AC adapter yourself. In terms of the CPU here, we've got 12 cores, 24 threads on board here. As I said, 2 gigahertz base clock, and then it boosts up to whatever. However, I have seen this within gaming sessions drop further below 2 gigahertz. We'll talk about that oddity a little bit later. I'm not sure if this is just early firmware. Those are things that AMD is still tuning, but that is something to note. And I don't know if that's resulting in frame loss or frame rates, lower frame rates as opposed to Intel's counterparts here. So that's something we're gonna have to come and see and monitor in the coming weeks and months. In terms of daily performance, this thing is very, very snappy. As you can tell here, there's really nothing to complain about. Everything works smoothly, everything works well. It's snappy, it's quick. When we launch the manager here, it works very, very well. I've been doing video editing on this device, and it's just, it churns through the video like butter. An additional note before I wrap up here on the CPU section is that this Ryzen 9 AI HX 370, AMD has moved away from the nominal 35 watt, 45 watt, 65 watt CPUs to what they're called now CTDP. So it allows manufacturers to configure the TDP for their particular device. That means you could end up buying a Ryzen 9 AI HX 370 CPU in 2 different laptops and have very, very different performance levels due to the way that the manufacturer has configured that TDP. So you'll need to be more cautious, pay more attention, look at the reviews, look at the specs of the laptop before you decide to buy it, because it may affect your overall performance. And of course, here we have that NPU, that's all the rage. So we're talking about 50 tops of performance, or sorry, 45 tops of performance from this NPU that's aboard the Ryzen 9 AI HX 370. And let's talk about that GPU for a moment here. So we've got the NVIDIA app installed, we're running the beta. And if we go here to graphics, let's see, system. Yeah, here we are. So we've got a 4070 laptop GPU. As I mentioned, the nominal wattage for this is actually 80 watts because we're very, very power constrained in this chassis, in the thin chassis. And that means we get with dynamic boost up to potential 105 watts during gaming. Of course, the 4070 GPU is the Lovelace generation. We're gonna get Blackwell, the next generation of GPUs, again at CES 2025. So this is kind of an odd time frame between generations where the new CPUs have arrived, but the GPUs have not arrived. And usually that's been the way in the past. We were very lucky with Lovelace to get both CPUs from Zen 4 and also new GPUs from NVIDIA to co-align and get, really, really formidable laptops and great reasons to upgrade. So perhaps if you're looking to upgrade, you may want to hold out until CES 2025 to see what NVIDIA drops and what the 5060, 5070, and 5080 and 90, what their power levels will look like. But that's something to be said. In addition, we've got 64 gigabytes of RAM. Big thing to note here on these ProArt P16 and also the new Zephyrus G16 series, due to Zen 5. It's not the actual manufacturers, it's not the RAM, it's the Zen 5 CPUs they're requiring onboard soldered RAM, or that's just a combination of things that I'm seeing. All of the Zen 5 CPUs that I'm seeing are coming with soldered RAM on the laptops. Perhaps this is, taking a playbook out of Apple, or taking a page out of Apple's playbook and trying to charge consumers more and gouge them for RAM. But be sure you buy the RAM that you need or you think you'll need, because you will not be able to upgrade. That's an unfortunate thing, but this one here is equipped with 64 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM. Now, the nice thing about that is in exchange for getting soldered RAM, we get much, much faster speed RAM. So this one here is LPDDR5 7500 megahertz, as opposed to the standard DDR5 modules we saw on the laptops of last year, topping out at about 5600 megahertz. So this is more than a 33% or 50% improvement. I think that's quite about enough. But you can see here that it's got a nice tactile feedback. It's very punchy, it's clicky. I can get up to speed very fast. As you can see here, 115 words per minute and climbing. There's no issue with this keyboard whatsoever. I quite like the keyboard, and I love the fact that there's no numpad here, because most creators don't need that. In addition, the large lettering here versus the Zephyrus G16, I think the actual look of this is a little bit more classy, a little bit more timeless, and this will be easier to fit into any office, gaming, or any casual or even professional environment. So from that perspective, I think this is very nicely done. As I mentioned, we've got just a white bright light here, and there is 4 levels, I believe. So let's start here. There's off, low, medium, and a high, and then you turn it off again. So The mouse pad here is absolutely smooth textures, multi-touch gesturing, absolutely fantastic. I've had zero issues, zero accidental touches when playing games. I didn't even bother to disable the trackpad, and it's been just absolutely phenomenal. I'm really happy with the basics that ASUS has got just right on point this time. So well done, ASUS. And I really appreciate the fact that they took the time to focus and understand what a creator needs, and they've got the basics nailed. All right, now to say a quick word about ASUS's Control Center software for the ProArt series. As you guessed it, it's ProArt Creator Hub. With these different operating modes, you can tune Windows mode, let Windows manage your power settings. You can go to Whisper mode, which puts your GPU at 40 watts. Standard mode puts your GPU at 80 watts, and that's the maximum, whereas performance mode allows you to gain that dynamic boost up to 105 watts. Additionally, you can also do a manual mode, so if you'll have to go here and edit, you can set whatever power levels you like. I was playing with these to try to get more performance out of it, but all it really does is just generate more heat with very little effect to performance. So I would say, skip this unless you're a hardcore enthusiast. Go with the performance mode. It'll give you that full 105 watts of power that this device can churn out with that GPU. We've also got some color control here. You can set the different types of color if you want to play with the color gamuts or play with the type of color that is rendered on the display. Of course, there's color calibration on board. You can go through the color calibration and redo it if you'd like, but this is factory calibrated. I don't see any reason to go and mess with that unless you're... So there's also Work Smart, which allows you to group apps together, and you can launch, a bunch of different apps with one button. Say if you're doing Davinci Resolve and Photoshop and maybe some other tools for your editing workflow, you could set that up here. You've got some control settings. This is for the dial pad, so you have to install this, and this will open up a new control panel which allows you to use that dial pad. Performance here is basically just going to allow you to free up some of the resources on the background. If there's apps running hogging memory or CPU, it allows you to shut them down or end those tasks. You can do that through the task manager, so I'm not sure why ASUS is deciding to replicate functionality that's existed in Windows since forever. And we have clean files here. Again, this is something you can do within Windows, so not sure what ASUS is thinking with that. So under color management, there's a lot of different control here with color because, of course, this is a creator's device, so you can do a lot of different things. You can color calibrate using images, a color calibration device, and so on and so on. And then new, due to the Zen 5 CPUs, is this creative LAN. So we've got a few different apps here which are AI driven or AI powered by that NPU that's on board. One is Muse Tree. This allows you to create images which are rendered on the NPU on the device, akin to what you would have seen with, Midjourney, or perhaps with even the GPT generator, Dolly, I believe. StoryCube allows you to also do something similar, and then you have the dial and control pad here. So if you open this, you'll see here that this is a different control panel that you have to accept a bunch of stuff for. So once you get into the dial pad control panel, you've got a lot of different settings here that you can enable and so on. To get the dial pad to work, you have to slide down from the trackpad on the right hand corner here, and then now you can see you can activate the actual trackpad or the dial pad. It's very similar to what I saw last year on the ProArt P16. Not really much has changed except for the AI based stuff here. If you're a fan of this software, it's great. I guess you have some more tools and things to tinker with. I personally despise them. I'd love to see these things just moved into the BIOS and handled at the hardware level with those AI engines that are on board these devices, akin to what Lenovo is trying to do with their LA1, 2, and now 3 third generation chip for tuning those devices for performance based on your workflow and application that you're running. This is a test of the webcam on the new ASUS ProArt P16 featuring the AMD Zen 5 CPUs that's new in 2024. Let me know what you think of this 1080p 30 FPS webcam. It's a little bit sad that even on a premium device like this, we're still stuck on 1080p and further only at 30 FPS. But it is what it is. It is clear. Let me know also how the audio sounds in a studio environment here with some sound dampening and with a microphone array that's on board this device. You should be able to get pretty clear audio, and any buzzing or any hissing or background noise should be, for the most part, removed. Let me know what you think of this video quality and the audio quality from the built-in webcam and mics within the ASUS ProArt P16 in the comments below. In addition, we've got Wi-Fi 7 on board, so I guess that's a nice thing to have. If you have the Wi-Fi 7 router and all the other peripherals set up at home, you can leverage that speed. Otherwise, it's pretty good. This MediaTek card that AMD is now collaborating with and doing with the Intel Wi-Fi cards, are decent. They're getting better. We've got Windows 11 Home. It's unfortunate that, you know, ASUS is selling a professional level device and only giving us Windows 11 Home. There are some feature differences that you can and cannot do with Home versus Pro. And I love that Gigabyte and some other manufacturers do give you a copy of Windows Pro, and ASUS here seems to have just cheaped out on a few dollars on that licensing, considering this is a very, very expensive machine to begin with. Additionally, as far as charging is concerned, you can use a USB Type-C charger, plug it into either of the USB Type-C ports on this device, and you can get up to 100 watts of charging. All right, so now for some gaming benchmarks. Here we are. This is Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty. I will look at the video settings here. This is at the native 4K resolution of this display, or 4K plus. And we're going to look at the graphics here. This is set to Ray Tracing Ultra with DLSS turned on to auto and DLSS frame generation on, so we can hit that at least 30 frames per second. So we'll run the benchmark here. We'll see here that the GPU is giving us about 100 watts. So it's very, very close to that 105, 106 watts that we should see out of that 4070 in this device. And thermals are handled actually quite well. But I think part of the reason is if you look at the power budgets here, this is a very, very constrained device. This is the most unfortunate thing about this laptop. It would have had so much more potential if they decided to make it just a little bit thicker like they did with the Razer Blade 18 and the 16. But as you can see here, the CPU, 75 degrees, but only at 18 or 20 watts, getting into the 1.3, 1.2, 1.6 gigahertz range. That's very, very low, and it's even below the rated 2 gigahertz base clocks on that CPU. But I guess because this is a GPU heavy game, maybe we don't need that. I'm not too sure what the situation is there, but we can see here that at 4K plus resolution, we're getting nearly 30 to 40 frames per second. So absolutely fantastic what the 4070 is still capable of, just 100 watts. I would have loved to see a little bit more power to that CPU, but we can see here it's about 130 watts of total power budget, perhaps with the CPU plus GPU combined load. So you're not going to get those crazy high frame rates that you would have expected from some of the heavy hitters like the 175 watt GPU laptops with 65 or 75 watt CPUs like the 14900HX Raptor Lake CPUs, or even the last generation Zen 4 8945HS 16 core, monster CPUs there. So there you have it. It's very, very playable. You can definitely play games on this device. I'll show you just a more realistic resolution because most of you won't be playing games at 4K. So if we turn this down to 1600p, you'll see here now that with DLSS turned on at Ray Tracing Ultra and frame generation, we can get some very, very good and respectable gameplay experience here. We're getting about 80 degrees Celsius. I have not seen this exceed maybe 84 or 85 degrees on either the CPU or the GPU in extended play sessions. So it handles quite well. And we can see here that 1600p with Ray Tracing Ultra, we're nearly at that 60 FPS. But as you can probably notice from the screen, it's quite visible. There is visible screen tearing. So if you're playing at this resolution and you're seeing screen tearing, you may want to turn on VSync to help address that because this is only a 60 Hz display. So now we can see here with the outdoor areas, we're getting well above 60 FPS. So it really varies on what's happening in the environment, but it's very, very easy to game at 60 FPS. And because of the OLED, the visuals here are absolutely stunning. The colors are fantastic, and you can enable HDR in Windows and game in HDR. So HDR gaming on an OLED display on a laptop, this is truly a feat to be celebrated. Alright, so for another example of benchmarking and gameplay capabilities from the ProArt P16, we've got here Company of Heroes 3. So we'll go here and look at the resolution set to the native 4K plus resolution. We're using AMD's FSR2 here, or uncapped FPS, excuse me, so we don't want a caps lock. We've got everything turned up to maximum here, so let's run the benchmark. So we're starting out with the CPU at about 20 watts roughly, sitting at 75 degrees, and we're getting 90 watts roughly on the GPU. So that's a combined power budget of about 110 watts for the CPU plus GPU here. There may be 5 or 10 watts laying around. It's trying to creep up to 22 watts on the CPU and 92, 93 on the GPU to really maximize those power budgets. But you can see here the 4K plus resolution. Natively, we can play this game locked to 60 FPS, and it's absolutely smooth because of that syncing there. And it's actually quite stunning to look at with the OLED display. So 4K plus resolution on a laptop, OLED, gaming, locked 60. Who would have thought? And if you look at the thermals, they're well in check, 79 and 82 on that CPU and GPU, nothing to complain about. The surface of the laptop itself is quite cool as well. You do get some heat back here, but in the WASD area in the keyboard, it's pretty cool to the touch. and it's comfortable to game for extended sessions as I've tested this in those scenarios. You can see here now that we're getting about 100 watts of power to the GPU and 20, so about 125 watts I believe is the combined power budget. But let's take a look at the settings here in Shadow of the Tomb Raider. We're running at 4K plus native, DLSS is set to quality, and otherwise all of the other graphics presets are set to high. So 4K plus, we're sitting close to 60 FPS with that VSync locked. It's holding steady, no screen tearing whatsoever. And the 0.2 millisecond refresh rate means it's smooth. And if you look at that frame time, it's a little high for my liking, about 17 milliseconds, but it's flat. We're not getting any bumps or notches in that frame time graph, which means the GPU and CPU are in sync and feeding each other nicely with all the data they need to get smooth gameplay experience here. Dropping to about 53 frames per second now, a little bit of stutter there, and this is quite a demanding game still, and I like to use this for benchmarks because it really does stress both the CPU and the GPU, and you can use this to determine kind of a baseline of where you sit with that GPU. So for those of you who were disappointed as I was last year with the 4070 and being limited to 100 watts because of the voltage limits, I think most of my concerns there have been allayed because the gaming performance is just fine. You're not going to get that 175 watts 4080 performance, but then again, you're not going to be spending like $1,000 more to get up to that tier of performance where you're going to get obviously 40 to 50% in some games. Yeah, I cannot tout the benefits of that OLED display and how gorgeous it is. Do see this in person if you can. Head over to a store or to a Best Buy near you. If they have this on display, check it out. It is just stunning. I don't think I can go back to any other display, perhaps mini LED, after having used these OLED displays on these laptops. Yeah, smooth. Holding at 60 FPS smooth. This is usually a very stressful section of the benchmark. I've seen frame rate dips here. It starts out very high as the mountains load, but as you pan down into the village here, the frame rate generally drops because there's a lot more activity and lighting and that fire there. So some physics effects to render, but this is holding steady at 60 FPS. Absolutely buttery smooth. So there we have it. We can say confidently that the ProArt P16, even though it's a professional device, can definitely game and give you a fun experience. I've been doing some Fortnite late night sessions on this and getting some frags in. It's absolutely fun to play on this device, and I don't think you'll have any issues having a good gaming experience. Alright, and for those of you that may be interested, I did run some typical benchmarks on this device. So looking at the PC Mark benchmark here, we're getting just shy of 8,000 on the score. I think in terms of the CPU here, there's really nothing to complain about. There's no workload that you should really be able to throw at the CPU that's going to stump it. It's very, very power efficient. As we saw there, it can really lower down on the power levels down to 1 gigahertz, 1 gigahertz plus for during gaming when you have a GPU intensive game. I hope that that's intentional, which means you can push a lot of the power to GPU. And here's a look at the Geekbench 6 score here. So this is a multi-core and the single-core CPU test. So here we've got 2825 on single core and 15542 on the multi-core. And these are the OpenCL scores for that 4070s GPU. We've got 110,216. And finally, the Vulkan counterpart to the GPU score from Geekbench 6, we're looking at 48,280. And here's some more information for you about that Ryzen 9 AI HX370 chipset. So as I mentioned here, we've got 100 megahertz bus speed, but we've got 4 P cores and 8 efficiency cores. So that's a big little kind of setup here. I believe the 4 P cores are Zen 5 cores and the 8 E cores are Zen 5C. That's the official naming convention here, but this is officially called Strix Point. And these are the introduction of the Zen 5 AI CPUs to the market here. And looking at the SSD that's provided here, we've got a Western Digital 2 terabyte SSD on board here. And these are the read and write speeds for the Western Digital 2 terabyte SSD on board the ProArt P16. They're respectable numbers, but they certainly could have been higher. With the SN850X that I've had in my other devices, I've seen that close to 7,000 on the read speed, and the write speed almost up close to 7,000 as well. So it's performant. You won't really notice any lag, but if you're doing lots of heavy copying or editing, moving large files, you will notice that there is a performance difference between this SSD device and perhaps others. So there is one more thing that I want to speak about, which is with the Zen 5 CPUs, there seems to be a lot more USB ports on board, particularly USB root hubs. And if you're one of those creators that likes to connect a lot of devices to your laptop on the go and you want to be able to capture and do other stuff, just turn the brightness down here a little bit so you guys can see that. Yeah, so we've got here a total of 1, 2, 3, and 4 USB 3.0 hubs, which means you can connect discrete devices to each of the 4 USB ports, 2 USB-A and 2 USB-C, and use them simultaneously to capture, to edit, to have sound input, and so on and so on. Generally, these things are not in any spec sheets or not provided, so you have to really get your hands on a laptop and go look at the device manager, take a peek to see what's under the hood. Okay, so to conclude, I think this is a very, very nice device here, but it is quite pricey as well. I'll talk about the price in just a moment, but based on the Ryzen Zen 5 CPUs here, we've got the RTX 4070 on board. It is well managed in terms of thermals. Now, there is no vapor chamber in this device, but that said, the thermals are well in check. Low 80s to mid-high 80s is the highest I've seen in long gaming sessions. It does get hot on the bottom, so don't use this device on your lap. Use it on a table when you're gaming or doing heavy workloads. But other than that, this device is comfortable. I'll touch a little bit about battery life as well. So in addition to the power charging from the 200 watt brick and USB Type-C charging that's available through the both USB Type-C ports on either side of the device, the battery life on this device has been disappointing. We're getting about 4 hours, which is pretty much typical and in line with what we're seeing from most of the Meteor Lake laptops as well. I was hoping for a more massive jump with Zen 5, hoping that we're going to finally break or get closer to the battery life that's claimed by the Macs and the Apple laptops, but we are certainly nowhere near the ballpark yet. Perhaps we'll have some surprises at CES from AMD, Intel, and Nvidia, but till then, I think this is an overall very good laptop. You can get a solid 4 hours of mixed workload is what I've seen. I don't trust the benchmarks that you see on the website, which say 7, 8, 9 hours. That assumes very low brightness and sitting there just on a web page or just watching Netflix. That said, though, it has some nice chops. I'm not really sold on the AI stuff. I think nor are many of you. Leave me a comment down below what your thoughts on the whole AI boom and the AI marketing with everything now. Why we need AI laptops, I'm not quite sure. But that seems to be the current game that's being played with the marketing around these laptop devices. So anyway, overall a very good laptop, very impressive. This is very pricey. This configuration with the RTX 4070, the Zen 5 CPU, and 64 gigabytes of DDR5 7500 megahertz RAM and a 2 terabyte SSD will run you 3,500 Canadian dollars. It is a very, very expensive device. But looking at the form factor, what you're getting with this, the amount of power and performance that's possible with this device, plus the 4K plus touchscreen, it has a digitizer built into it. This truly is a creator's device. I do wish though that this display would fold all the way back, which would have made it much easier to draw or perhaps do any sort of graphics work. So you could turn the device around and have the screen facing you and just use that to draw. But alas, it is the choice that ASUS has made, giving us a traditional form factor on a laptop, and I'm very, very pleased. We've got SD port on board. We've got USB Type-C ports on either side of the device that are very fast. We've got USB Type 3, USB Type-A, 3.2 Gen 2, 10 gigabits ports. We've got a full size HDMI 2.1 port. Couldn't have asked for much, so more. All right, that's my thoughts around the ASUS ProArt P16. Leave your comments below. Let me know what you think of this format. It's more raw, kind of general conversation about this laptop and what my experience with using it has been, and pointing out specifics about this device that I may not have. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave a comment below. Let me know what you think about OLED laptops. Let me know what you think about the Zephyrus G16 versus the ProArt and ASUS in general, and what you're looking forward to next year if you're in the market looking to buy a laptop. Thanks very much again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.